Welcome to Who's Who of Houston Asian Americans. I'm your host, Jimmy Ma. We have a very special guest in the studio with us today, Phillina Lai.
Hi, Jimmy. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Phillina. We are very proud to have you as an Estonian. You are the epitome of someone that has achieved the American dream. In our society, in our community, a lot of people know about you and your siblings. You have three siblings. All of you are highly educated, but more importantly, you have a fulfilling life. You're a mother to twin sons.
A boy and a girl.
A boy and a girl.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
perfect. And they're 5 years old?
Yes, they are 5.
And you are also a high par attorney with BP.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that.
So it's amazing that you're able to maintain this a perfect work-life balance.
Hardly perfect.
Hardly perfect.
Okay, but,
I mean, I'm sure you don't sleep
that's
much.
right. Yeah. There's a juggle.
Could you tell our audience a little bit about growing up in Houston, how you are able to achieve so much success?
Oh, well, thank you for that very flattering introduction, and I'm hardly perfect. It's a struggle every day, just like everybody else. I try to work and balance the work and life with everything and myself and my own interests as well. I grew up here in Houston, Texas, and I graduated from Cy Falls High School in the Cy Fair district. And from there, I left and have been gone for about a dozen years, and now I've come back to Houston. I've been back for about 10 years now. So I came back as an attorney after going to Stanford for undergraduate and Northwestern for law school.
Definitely a role model for our next generation. But not only do you achieve a lot of success in education, but you were able to maintain a very interesting lifestyle because you have a lot of outside interests. I knew that in high school you were very active in a lot of organizations. Even now you're still active in the community. What have you done with your professional organizations and also with the Asian community?
Yeah, well, I'm very in touch with my Asian heritage, and I try my best to get involved in the Asian community and give back where I can. My family and I have grown up and been, part of the Asian community, and it's only right, I feel, to contribute back where I can. So as a lawyer, I have played an active role in the Asian American Bar Association. I was a board member for the last 2 years, tried to help them get more active and more fundraising so we can do events for the community. At BP, I take a real interest in our diversity initiatives, and we do a very good job and concerted effort of making sure we are an inclusive workplace. And that means for women in all colors, and I try to take a leadership role in doing programming and also just broadcasting the importance of that inclusion principle that we have at BP.
That is. I have to applaud you for putting the effort because a lot of us second-generation immigrants, we've achieved professional success in our white-collar professions. A lot of times we try to blend in. We want to be part of the mainstream, and a lot of times we forget about our own cultural and heritage. And we have to remember to have to give back and to pass on to the next generation how we've made it, or how we've not really made it, but how we've been able to kind of get a little bit ahead of what our parents had to go through.
Right. Yeah.
But at the large American corporations, we both know that there is a glass ceiling for women and for minorities, or we call it a bamboo ceiling.
Right.
So for you to be able to do that at BP, it is a big bonus for the other employees, other women, other minorities to look up, to know that there's someone that they can speak with, to be able to get advice from. What would you tell a young immigrant that came to the United States recently? What would you tell her or him to do to be able to continue and have success?
Boy, that's a tough question. I totally agree with you. When you're a young minority in a population of people who don't look like you and don't talk like you, it's very challenging. And the natural thing as a child is you want to blend, and I'm guilty of that as well. As a child, I remember going to Chinese school on Saturday and Sunday, having to do the Chinese art and the Chinese dance, and I really didn't know why we were doing all of that, and my mother just said it's very important. And it was probably many years later that I realized, you know what, I think I gleaned a lot of my culture from those activities. And, we went to Chinese youth camp, and sometimes you're wondering, what am I doing here? Why can't I just go to the swimming pool and play with my American kids
my friends? My friends from school.
Yeah, you call them your real friends because they're the ones you see all the time.
That's right.
But, I think for for better or worse, you don't sometimes realize until later that it is very important to continue to expose yourself and to embrace your heritage. So, for fresh immigrants coming over and trying to assimilate, I encourage them to try to learn the best and get the best from their American culture, but never to forget where they come from, because it is so important, and it is actually so much of your human capital is tied up in your culture. And I have found at every place I've worked, people are fascinated with the Chinese culture, the Chinese upbringing, just the Chinese principles that all of us Chinese Americans have been brought up in. And I think that the more you know about it, the more of an asset you actually are. So you don't want to ignore that part of you, and really appreciate it, embrace it. So
I love that.
Balance it.
What you said really hit the nail on his head, because when we're growing up, we didn't appreciate what our parents did. But now everybody knows how proud of you your parents are.
Right.
But now we are actually proud of our parents because they maintain the heritage and force us to go, and we appreciate them for doing that.
Right.
We both are able to speak Mandarin fluently, and I have to thank my parents for that.
Oh, yeah.
Even though I hated it.
I know, nobody liked it.
and it really, it reflected our own unique identity.
Yeah.
Like I said before, you have to blend in, but nowadays, you can maintain your own uniqueness, it's about diversity.
Yeah.
Houston is a city of diversity. We probably are one of the most diverse cities in the United States.
So.
We're all full of immigrants that have contributed to the fabric of society. We built our community together. We've witnessed the growth of Houston in the last 30-some years since we've been here. And we're proud to call this city home. And we want to continue to give back and build and see it grow. And in order to do that, we have to have young professionals like yourself that have been through this to pass their knowledge on to somebody else. Speaking of speaking language fluently, you know that being bilingual helps you in your career also?
Oh, yeah, certainly. It has been tremendously helpful in my career, as well as my extracurricular activities, as I try to get more involved in the community and helping do outreach activities. Once they learn you speak Chinese, then they feel like you're really Chinese. You're not,
That's right.
You're not an American kid that happens to be born into a Chinese family, And it's funny because I'm actually, subjecting my children to the same kind of so-called torture that we went through. I'm trying to get them into Chinese school, and they're already, even though they're only 5 years old, asking me, why do I have to go? Why do I have to learn this? I'm American. And it's funny how the circle repeats itself, and I'm now trying to say the same things my mom said to me about why it's important to learn these things. And I have to model it for my children to understand why I'm doing this to them. And so it's part of the whole life cycle, I think.
Well, since you brought it up, we could say that there's a mainstream perception of Asian families, specifically Asian moms, as being the tiger mom.
Right.
Could you kind of discuss a little bit how that image has came upon? Because we both know that our parents we could also be tiger moms, but there's a reason. There's a reason why Asian American children have more scholarly success and more success in life. There's a reason why. It's discipline. Is it because of the tiger mom attributes? Could you tell us a little bit about how to define that?
Well, I have to say, when I read that book, I really resonated with a lot of the principles they said. And in fact, I didn't think it was really that odd. A lot of those things were very just customary, and all my friends had moms like that. So I didn't realize it was considered tigerish to even be that way until the New York Times and all the critics were kind of going and critiquing the book and saying, gosh, the tiger mom method is so strict and just so narrow. But I really don't think it's about being a tiger mom, so to speak, and micromanaging your kids. It's really just about instilling the discipline and the rigor of, making sure you always do your best, try your best, focus on things that you want to do. Don't just dabble. Now, of course, when they're young, you have to let them dabble, and I think that's a part of American culture that Chinese families need to learn from. Is it's okay to dabble to a certain extent. You don't have to. Not everything has to have a 1-to-1 ratio of reward and time. And so I think there are things that Asian families can learn from the Western culture, and there's vice versa. And I think part of the tiger mom parenting certainly helped me be successful to the extent that I'm considered successful. I think that the discipline and the principle of pushing myself to my best and always making sure what I deliver is to the most of my abilities. I think that is something my mom and dad always hammered home. If you're going to do it, do it to your best. Don't do half job. So I think that's a principle that is very important, and it's not unheard of. I think American culture has that too. It's just maybe the tiger mom executes it a little differently. Or,
Could be a little bit of stereotype
Yeah.
too, to kind of look at that way. Look, first of all, I want to applaud your parents. Your mom and dad has both been active in the community, and they've really raised great kids. all three of your siblings have achieved so much. You go on with your dad to give speeches in China before, I believe. You went to Shanghai?
Yes, yeah. My dad and my father's also an attorney, and I did go with him to Shanghai. We went to the World Expo a few years ago, and we were there to represent Houston and kind of talk about the Houston business community. So, yes, we jointly spoke about some of the developments in the local community and then how the Asian American community is really coming up the ladder in Houston and making an impact. So,
and the reason I brought it up, because it relates back to, even though we could be perceived as having tiger moms, but yet you're still able to maintain a very close ties with your parents. You still respect your parents and appreciate them for the sacrifices they have made by immigrating here so that they give us a better life.
Yes.
Now, we're going to take a very quick break, and please continue to watch Who's Who of Asian Americans. Welcome to Who's Who of Houston Asian Americans. I'm your host, Jimmy Ma, and we have Phillina Lai with us today.
Hi everyone.
Before the break, Phillina was telling us about her travels to China, how she's traveled to Shanghai to spread word about the vibrant business environment here in Houston and how much opportunities is available to Chinese companies. But not only do you travel to China, but you've actually been to quite a bit of places. Can you tell us why you love traveling so much?
Yeah. Well, I've always had a passion for traveling. I think traveling allows you to see the world and appreciate different cultures and just understand what else is going on beyond your immediate circle. So I have to thank my parents because they always gave me that opportunity to go back to Taiwan. As a child, we would go almost every summer, and every chance we could. We would be back in Taiwan with my grandparents. I remember being enrolled in a summer school there, and I was an American, born Chinese kid with very, very limited Chinese, but having to, commingle with all the locals. And I remember when I got my first bowl of porridge, the rice porridge, I had no idea what that was. It looked like, kind of gross, actually.
So, a big culture shock.
Yeah, it was a culture shock. Yeah. And I remember crying and not enjoying it, and then eventually learning, this is pretty cool, too, and this is just like preschool in America with different snacks.
You were there for a whole summer semester in a local school. In
a local school for a few weeks, so maybe 1 month or something. I was in there.
That's very. How did you keep up with the curricular?
Yeah, well, as a kid, it's mostly fun and singing songs and stuff like that. So, but at first it's lonely because you are different. You're not local, but you look local, but you don't speak locally, and the dialects are different. So it was a challenge, and but I remember it because I made some good friends, and I remember the experience and the food, and that I think was the birth of kind of my interest and fascination with Asian culture. And I remember thinking, this is actually pretty fun to come back here and get to experience a different kind of education system. So every summer we went back as a family. And then I have pretty much taken that travel bug and gone elsewhere. My husband and I, we love to travel, and we've gone to Africa, we've gone to Europe, we've gone all over the world. And prior to having kids, we really, really tried to go to places that we knew nothing about, just for the purposes of learning. Now that with the children, it's a little tougher logistically to go anywhere, but it is still very important to me that they see the world beyond the United States. And so we've already taken them back to Taiwan, and we spent a few weeks there when they were 3 years old. And again, I tried to get them involved in the local Chinese school there, get them playing with the local kids, and they have been speaking Chinese since they were born. I've always had the rule that we speak Chinese at home, because if we don't speak it at home, we're not going to get the chance to practice. And so I could really say they are dual language children, and at this point they can still speak fluently, and I hope to continue that. And part of that is making sure we always go back, and we go back to China, Taiwan, and visit our our relatives and visit different sites. Of course, we'll do the tourist things too, but really, I just think every time they go back, they're going to get a little bit more of the Chinese culture, and they're going to understand more why it's important. It's not just them who are learning Chinese and doing Chinese homework and, to see the world and how important it is.
It's truly amazing because I admire your plan, because that is definitely the best way for your children to bridge that cultural gap, to find their own roots. Even for your parents, the way you found it with your parents and your grandparents. I know that you go back to visit your grandfather at 93 years old.
Yeah, 93 years old. So we're planning our trip right now to go back in the fall and again visit grandparents and my in-laws who are in Shanghai. So we kind of do a tour of Taiwan and China when we're there and try to touch base with everybody that is still living over there.
So for second generation Houstonians, Houston is so different compared to anywhere else, but specifically to Asia. So when you were going back to China and Taiwan in the beginning, what were your initial image looking at that culture as a Houstonian, as a native Houstonian?
Yeah. I think one of the shocking things is just how crowded it is and just how dense it is. The city, the people, everybody is just jammed together. I mean, it's like people here think New York is crowded, and I mean, it's really not compared to Taiwan or Shanghai. I mean, it's just mobs of people everywhere. And the other thing that really impresses me and continues to impress me is the entrepreneurship in all over Asia, really. It's just, everywhere you turn, you see new ideas and new businesses popping up everywhere. And you're starting to see that come over to Houston, come over to the States. And it's just fascinating to see like how fast they are embracing technology. I mean, 10 years ago, Shanghai looked nothing like it is today, for example. New buildings going up every other week. I mean, it's really impressive how fast the growth of Asian countries and all the people there are catching up to them. I remember as a child thinking America was the kind of epitome of technological advancement. I don't know if that's quite true anymore, because I think they are giving us some competition now.
As developing nations, China and Taiwan, because of such a huge population, in order to make it, they really have to be fast and be able to adapt and to learn quickly. And with technology, it's useful for people that are living in such a highly populated city. There's 40 million people in Shanghai at any time. 40 million in a city the size of no bigger than Harris County. And Taipei has almost 8 million in the city by itself. It's just so unique, because I remember when I was going back to Asia as a child, it was so different. It was a culture shock. It was distant. It was unfamiliar. Yet there were some things that I recognized being part of an Asian family. But I knew that made my parents happy to go back. And now that you know that your kids will appreciate you when they grow up, knowing that what you've done, just like how you've appreciated your parents. Like I said, we're so thankful to have our parents do that for us. Not every parent understands that your diversity, your own heritage is important, that it is unique to yourself. What do you tell your kids when you go to China and Taiwan with them? How do you teach them that this is how your grandparents grew up, how your great-grandparents grew up? How do you tell them this? It's always interesting to me, as Americans, second-generation immigrants, how do you connect that? How do you bridge that?
Yeah, it is. It's hard. I mean, especially when they're only 5 and they're barely really getting what's going on day-to-day life. So, but they do grasp more than I think most people give them credit for. When we go back, I try to make sure we go back to where my mom and dad were born, and show them, this is where grandpa went to college. This is where grandma, did her first job. And so, sometimes they get that concept and they can kind of imagine, oh, this is where my grandparents lived and grew up. And then, I think that showing them also the young generation there, all those kids there, that they can see people that look just like them. They're all living there too, on the other side of this globe. And I remember before we went to Taiwan, I got out a globe and I showed them, this is where we're going to go. We're going around the world, and you're going to see a lot of people who look just like you. It's going to be pretty different from Houston. And they were fascinated. I mean, right now, everything is fascinating to them. So while they're willing and are able to absorb as much as they can, I want to make sure we plant the right seeds and the natural curiosity to learn more. And, always weaving in fun things I think, is important, because you don't want them to feel tortured to go back to the motherland. You know, you want them to think back, oh, it was fun when we did
That's
this,
right.
and when we went to the top of Taipei 101, that was really cool, and you know, we went to a lot of fun things, and so they remember Taiwan as good food and fun times, and so of course they're going to want to go back.
Positive connotation.
Positive, yeah.
So let them know that it is fun to go back, so they're willing to go back and experience a different culture. Even though it is really part of their own culture, it is still foreign to them.
Yes.
And that also keeps and helps the children understand and appreciate other cultures too.
Yes, yes.
Like we have grown up because of the traveling.
In fact, this year, my daughter's preschool class, there was one little girl, 4.5-year-old girl, who came from Shanghai, didn't speak any English, and only spoke Chinese. And Madeline and her were the only 2 Chinese children in this classroom. And immediately the teacher asked Madeline to be the translator for this little girl. And she was so happy to do it, because she felt very proud of herself, that I can speak Chinese, I can help this little girl. And you know, now fast forward, we're almost at the end of the school year. Her and this little girl are very good friends. She's speaking English. She speaks both Chinese and English on the playground with her. I love seeing that happen, because you know, that's a example of her embracing her culture, her realizing she needs to help somebody who doesn't know, you know, the way of the world in Houston, and so trying to help her bridge the gap, and as simultaneously learning from this little girl about her life back in Shanghai. And it's just, I love watching that.
That is so sweet.
Yeah.
That is a wonderful story. It epitomizes this perfect passing of the torch of what your parents did for you, and you for your children for other immigrant families too.
Right.
I really love to have you on the show. It's been a privilege, and it's been fun. It's always a pleasure to speak with you,
Thank
Phillina.
you, Jimmy.
There's so much more our audience, whether the immigrants or not, to learn from how your parents educated you, and how you bring your kids up. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching Who's Who of Houston Asian Americans. Please tune in again.